hope all is well where you are, and feel like we're progressing. 89 days away from college football, we're starting to believe that this thing actually may happen.
Yeah, it's starting to look that way. I heard what you were just saying about baseball. When I moved up to Connecticut 24 years ago, I had a friend, a really good friend who I'd worked with in Alabama, who had gotten a job with the New Jersey Devils. And because of that, I had free tickets to Devils games, and I lived about 2 hours away. So I went to several games, and I became a big fan of the Devils, and they won, I think it was 2 Stanley Cups during the time that I was rooting for them. And then the NHL, strike happened, and there was, I think they missed the whole season, around 2004, somewhere in that area. And I never have watched hockey again since then. Now, I do have to admit that the Devils have not been any good since then. But even when they first came back, I had no interest in watching it, and I just I don't know whether baseball would be quite to that extreme, but hockey has not been the same since that.
Well, and a lot of it may not be bitterness towards the sport, but you almost realize that you can live without it.
Yeah.
Like you can move. Your life will go on without it. And it's like, I don't know if college football needs to go through that. Can you continue to say, this money, Brad, other than, can you believe that we've got a sport that people mail $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 just for the privilege to buy a seat?
Yeah, and Ryan, I think that's the scary thing to the schools, and especially to the more specific organizations, within that handle. Stuff like Tide Pride at Alabama.
Sure.
Most of the big schools have something like that, and I think the biggest fear for all of them is that with this new environment that we'll be in to start the current season, assuming that it starts on time, and the assumption that we all have that there's no way that there will be full stadiums, that at best they're going to be like 30% full, and it's going to be a completely different experience. And with the number of people who either are kind of forced to watch from home or choose to stay at home just because it doesn't seem like an environment that would be that much fun to watch a game in, the fear is that those people are gonna come to the realization that, hey, you know what? This is in different ways, just as fun of an experience. Sure, you miss out on certain things about being there, but then there are also things when you watch from home that you can experience that you can't when you're there, or things you don't have to experience, like the traffic afterward and stuff like that. And, and if people feel like, it's not that bad to watch a game at home as opposed to, being there all day. And then some of those people, don't renew their season tickets or, whatever it may be, then I think that's a major blow to college football if that happens. And I think that is a concern of a lot of schools right now because these people who probably didn't want to be watching from home are going to be forced to do it, and they might find out they kind of like it.
So if you're an athletic director, knowing that the cord, not the cord cutting, but I guess you could tie all this together. But that 70-inch LED television right there competes with those donations as the market continues. And I think the other part of this is we're all coming out of this with financial concerns.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah, do you? Does people have an extra $5,000 or $10,000 to be laying around going, oh, yeah, sure, I'll spend that in entertainment because that's what it is.
Yeah, I think anybody who at some point in this process obviously there are a lot of people who lost their jobs, but then there are others who, were furloughed or had to take a pay cut or whatever, in order to keep working. They have new financial realities because of this, and they're all sitting around saying, okay, where can we cut cost? What's not essential? I think as much as they've all convinced themselves in the past that their favorite football team is essential, and I know to most Southerners that always has been essential. I think when the realities of life start slapping you in the face and you look at things that you must spend your money on, all of a sudden, for the first time, you start to consider that non-essential. And then, who knows where that goes? If you don't have the money to spend, and look, I mean, for some people, it's going to take them a few years to get back on their feet after this. And I think that's the scary part to a lot of people who are involved in this, is that it's just not going to be quite the same as we move forward. And look, I'm sure you saw the stuff. Was it last week? I'm trying to remember exactly when it was. When there were a lot of people involved in the non-revenue sports that were issuing their concerns over the name, image, and likeness stuff, because they're saying, okay, if some of these businesses are going to start focusing their money on individual players, then that's less money that they're going to be giving to athletic departments. And that money that they used to give to athletic departments, used to be spread out, across a bunch of different teams. Yeah, sure, the majority of it was going to football, basketball, whatever, but some of these sponsorships involve non-revenue sports as well. And I think that basic principle applies for football, which is that you always had businesses lining up. I mean, just using Alabama as an example again. How many businesses in the state of Alabama, or even regionally, in the Southeast, wanted to be associated with Alabama, and they were willing to pay big money in order to do that? Well, I would guess the way that a lot of businesses have taken, their own hits during the last few months, they're going to be like, some of the individual consumers or the individual fans, where they've got to be a little bit more selective as to how they spend their money. And there might not be, as many of them that are willing to, throw it at a football program in order to be associated with it. So, there's a big trickle-down effect from all this.
Brad, when you look at the players now arriving back on campus, you're a guy that understands stats and sample sizes, and we're seeing a lot of positive tests. A lot of these are asymptomatic around college football, and I think we'll continue to that. I've tried to use the example, if we went to the grocery store and we surveyed 100 people and we tested them for this virus, then you're going to have some of those healthy people that are walking up that don't know they've got it. It's just the simple math. It's going to happen. Why should it be any different with football? But you attach a name like Alabama or another major school to it, it kind of grabs your attention in a different way.
Yeah, and look, every school that's testing these players, they were expecting some positive tests in there. I don't think this has been alarming to any of them. This was the expectation. I think sometimes to fans and to a lesser extent some people in the media, that they're surprised by this. But I think what it should tell you more than anything, this is not really anything about football or about athletics. What it's about is the general population. Like you use the grocery store example. Like, we should look at the percentage of players on the football team or in the overall staff of, people being tested, and recognize that they're no different than the rest of us. They've been doing the same things we have, over the last several months. And so whatever that percentage of them, are testing positive, that's what we should expect is the percentage of people who are walking around with this virus and aren't showing signs of it, so they don't realize they have it, in the general population. And so it should be a little bit of a concern to all of us, and a reason for us to all be a little bit more careful. I think I look around. I don't know, what you see down there. I live in a place where still, 90% of people, if not a little bit more, are wearing masks every time they go into a store. But it used to be 100%. And it's gotten to where in the last week or so, I see people, here and there who are not wearing a mask, and I see a lot less concern over the distancing. And so I think that people they're getting a little careless, a little reckless about, everything that we were doing that kind of helped get the numbers down. And look, the bigger question is what's going to happen after they get started, because they're eventually going to get to the point where no one's testing positive anymore. Let's get the players, start working out, start getting ready for the season. But they're not going to be sequestered. This is not like the NBA plan where they're all going to go live in the same area and they're going to be isolated from everyone else. I mean, you still have college kids who are going to be around other kids their age outside of the team. and eventually there are going to be more positive tests. What happens then, and especially what happens when that occurs during the season? Do you shut down a whole team because you had 5 or 6 positive tests in a week? I don't know what the answers are, and I don't know when we're going to find out if that answer is going to come from another sport prior to college football starting. But that's the big question that everybody has.
Now, obviously, it takes talent to win football games and national titles. But as Alabama goes back today, it's not about the next 60. It's about the previous 60 days. To me, what these guys have been able to do solo, they've been rallied by their teammates and leaders of football team. And this is not just in Alabama, Tuscaloosa. This is Columbus, Ohio. This is South Carolina for Clemson. Those teams that are competing to win a national title, what those guys have been able to accomplish on their own is going to give them a chance to kind of be further ahead than the rest of their colleagues around college athletics.
Yeah, and I don't know, Ryan, how much, all of this stuff matters when you get into, week 8, 9, 10, somewhere in that range. I would assume that after a certain point, everyone kind of gets onto the same page. But I would think that how well you were able to keep up with your training and how little you have to do to get back into game shape at this stage could be differentiating when you talk about, week 1 and week 3, which are 2 really big weeks for Alabama as far as their goals for the season. Those are there are a lot of teams that don't have a losable game in the first 3 weeks. But Alabama's got 2 huge ones that they have to be ready for. And so that is a big deal. And especially when you consider that, these guys are so used to, being able to train with the best facilities available anywhere. And they've been removed from that, and they've had to make use of, whatever they have in and around their homes in order to stay in shape. And no matter, how dedicated they were, it's still not the same, as being there, in those facilities with all that equipment and having the strength and conditioning coaches right there to push you, the nutrition staff to give you all the right things to eat. All these guys, no matter whether, they are living in an area where they can't access anything like that, or even if they're living in $1 million home where you've got, your own workout area, it's still not what they're accustomed to. And so they all are going to have work to do to be able to get back up to speed. And so, I do think that whoever has done the best job of getting close to staying in game shape, I think those teams are going to have some sort of an advantage in the first few weeks of the season. Of course, the other part of this, and I don't know the answer to, is how much will it affect teams, the ones that didn't get to practice at all in the spring, as opposed to the ones that might have been able to get 5 or 6 practices in before they had to shut down. So I think that's the other thing is that one is the physical side of it. 2 is just being able to to put in stuff and to be able to see some of the early enrollees who got a chance to get out there and get some work in, and for other schools they didn't, and that could make a difference on some fronts.
Brett, are you buying this hype around Tennessee? I know they win the month of May and June. Off seasons generally won by the Volunteers, but can they win September, October, and November? There's a lot of hype coming out of Knoxville.
Yeah, look, they should be excited. I mean, I realized that Butch Jones had at least one signing class that ranked like 5th in the nation or something. So it's not that Tennessee has not been able to sign quality players, since Philip Fulmer left. I mean, they've gotten a few good classes in there. The question is, at least coming up for this year, how good can they be? I think we all knew when Jeremy Pruitt took that job that give them a few years and they're going to be pretty good on defense, and I think that's going to be the case. The big question is offense, and especially when you look at the last few years and just the way that, I don't want to say the tables have turned, because it wasn't one of those things that happened overnight. We've seen it happening gradually over the years. We saw, Alabama's 2016 defense was one of the best in modern college football. And when they wore down in that fourth quarter against Clemson in that national championship game, they couldn't stop them. And we've seen, other really good defenses. Clemson's defense this past year just got taken behind the woodshed by LSU after the first few drives of the game. So we know the power of offense, and a really good offense is going to beat a really good defense in today's college football. And I would say in most of today's football in general, it usually does in the NFL as well. And does Tennessee have that? Do they have a quarterback, first and foremost? And I've yet to see enough consistency out of anyone at that position at Tennessee to lead me to believe that they're ready to make a huge jump this year. To me, until they have someone who's a lot more consistent at quarterback, they're not going to be able to beat Florida and Georgia very often. And I mean, we're fairly questioning whether Florida can beat Georgia. Tennessee is still a good bit behind Georgia, and I think given how good Dan Mullen is as a coach and how well he's done recruiting and the way that he's improved their offense, I think Tennessee's comfortably behind Florida. We'll find out some more this year when Florida has to go to Knoxville, but still, I think until they can get a lot better on offense, it's really tough to consider them a contender even in their own division.